You're listening to Hustle Culture, a podcast that shows you how to take your hustle to the next level. I'm Jordan Glickman, a 24-year-old homeless entrepreneur who's constantly looking for a better way. Whether it be maximizing work-life balance while trying to reach my first 7 figures, or taking advantage of credit card points and biohacking my way to optimal health and efficiency, I'm all about it. Regardless if you're an entrepreneur or not, I invite you to join me in my journey of constant self-development. Join me and my guest as we deliver real value and actionable steps to embrace and make the most out of your hustle. Welcome back to another episode of Hustle Culture. I'm your host, Jordan Glickman, and today I wanted to take just a couple minutes to talk about finding your purpose and your why. And I want to do this episode with absolutely no notes. I want to do it raw. I want to do it as uncut as we can get it. And I want this to be just more genuine. I think one of the things that I've really disliked when I ask people for their purpose and their why, like why they're building the business they are, what's driving them internally, like to the people that are ultimately really successful, they don't have this clear-cut answer a lot of the times. And not expecting everybody to be perfect and spot on with it by any means, but it's kind of like, in a way, demotivating when you're trying to drive and you know that you want to drive, but you don't know why. So you don't know your why, you don't know your purpose. And then you hear all these people online talk about they know their why and their purpose. But then when you meet someone in person and you have them as like maybe a mentor or someone providing a lot of guidance, they don't have this why and purpose, and they don't really show you how to get it. And maybe that's just been my experience, and it's not the norm. But nonetheless, I wanted to talk about my why, my purpose, share it on a very genuine level of where it is now, because what I think will also be interesting is how it changes over the next 1 or 5 years, because I'm certain that it will. So I want to talk about right now, today, what is my why for doing what I do, for hustling as hard as I do, for working as hard as I do, for putting in all the hours that I do? And what's the purpose of all of that? And those being kind of to and of the same thing, but not necessarily the exact same thing. Your why and your purpose not being the exact same for you. So I think one of the main things for me is self-growth. I think the reason why I do it, one of the reasons why I do it is for self-growth. It's not always money and monetary. I know a lot of the previous episodes have talked a lot about money, but a lot of it for me personally is just achieving it. So for example, the other day I was starting to curate in my mind that my new goal monetarily is closer to 10 or $50 million. And with that kind of mindset, it's not necessarily to me about the money. And we'll talk about money in a little bit here shortly, but it's not necessarily about the money and just achieving that, but for me, it's about the self-growth. Because if you're able to achieve a $10 million income, or a business that does 10 million, or a business that is valued at $10 million, to me, it's the achievements of being able to scale a company that big. It's the achievements of managing a team that big, for raising funds for a company of that size, for being able to take a company from zero to that, or from wherever it started to that. Regardless, like for me, a big part of it is that self-growth and that personal achievement and just achieving something higher and taking my own personal self to lengths at which challenges me drastically and dramatically, that it just urges me and provokes me, like pushes me directly into self-growth. And I think that that's something that I've always strived for, is just ultimately self-growth. I think on the side of purpose, one of my purposes in doing why I'm doing what I'm doing is to be able to give back. Now, granted, I may have not seen as much as a lot of people have, but I've seen a little bit from the traveling I have done around Southeast Asia alone, and just living in the Philippines, which is a third world country, for a few years now. And I've seen people play in trash. I've seen people live in conditions that you just would not imagine. I've seen people live off of amounts of money or no money, or live in certain places that you just could not fathom and understand unless you see it. And I'm sure there is so much worse. I'm sure there's so much more out there. I know there is for a fact. But to me, being able to give back is something that truly fulfills me internally. And so that's part of my purpose, is The reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is also partially because I want to give back because of the things that I've seen, the reasons that I know that I'm in a position to be able to grow and to have that opportunity to develop myself, to build a business, to generate income, to do all these incredible things. I want to be able to give to those who haven't had a chance. Even if it's just buying a young entrepreneur a computer so he has a tool, that to me would make me so fulfilled. And speaking of that, I just bought a second computer because I needed a backup computer. And I'm going to consider in the future giving that away to someone that needs it as soon as I don't need this backup computer because I just need it for a few weeks. Anyways, that is a side note. One of the other reasons why I do what I'm doing is for freedom. So it's financial freedom. But I think for me, rather than just saying I want financial freedom, because I think that that's kind of over talked about, for me, financial freedom really to me means choices. It's the ability to make a choice. And those choices being one in a number of so many different choices that you are able to make because of the amount of money you make or the time that you have available. So for me, it's the choice to go to anywhere in the world that I want to. It's the choice to have a maid or a helper, as they call it here in Asia, to live with you, to be able to help with your, whether it's your pets, it's with your cleaning, it's with your traveling, it's with your kid, whatever it may be. Being able to have the ability to make the choice to hire someone for a lot of these things, which then ultimately for myself, I see it as buying back time. And so if I'm able to work this hard and work this hard now so that I can make a choice to have a helper, to buy back that time, I can then reinvest that time into friends, family, close peers, colleagues, be able to reinvest the time that I'm saving because of the money that I could leverage into things like hiring other people to do jobs for me that just take up time that I find more valuable to be leveraged for other things, again, like what I just mentioned. So again, those choices being one of so many things, and I'm trying not to state the obvious here, things like traveling or being able to eat what I want or wear what I want or go where I want. I think a lot of those things are the obvious things, but I think being able to make any of these choices because of the amount of money that is there and that amount of money that I'm working towards, whether it's $1 million or $10 million, is part of my why. It's part of the purpose that I'm driving for. The purpose is to then be able to make choices, the purpose being to have financial freedom. And these are the reasons why, is so that I can make the choices that I want to make. And when I have that amount of money, I can then buy back the time that I find more valuable to be reinvested into other things besides washing the dishes, walking the dog, even though I may personally still choose to do a lot of these things in the future. It's the fact that I have the choice and the ability to make that choice. And I think to help anybody that's listening to this that still doesn't understand how do they determine their why and their purpose, I believe I read it a long time ago, whether it was in a book or in an article. I read that there was 3 or 4 different things to ask yourself and to focus on to determining what your why and your purpose are or is. So for anyone listening right now that's still not aware of their why or their purpose and how I came to find my own, which I've talked about just the ones I can think of off the top of my head, I remember reading vaguely either in an article or in a book, wherever it may have been, there was 3 or 4 different things that help you determine what your why and your purpose are. And I actually figured mine out more recently on what it was that I'm really striving for and why and what drives me. And I think I not figured it out because I think it's ever changing ultimately, but I think that I became more clear on my why and my purpose during COVID when I had so much time to myself, so much time to think, so much time to put together, vision boards and things that, why am I doing what am I doing? And, just having so many of my thoughts becoming more visual, whether it was writing them out on a whiteboard or talking to people about them. But ultimately, I think that those 3 things were, I believe one of them was your passion. So for me, myself, as the name of this podcast, Hustle Culture, hustling and working super hard is something that I personally do enjoy. And so I think that for me is one of the things there inevitably is that I do just love working hard, overcoming challenges, and creating challenges by creating new things, whether it's creating a business and figuring out how to scale it up or figuring out how to overcome the challenges within that business and building it. I think that that's a big part of my passion, is working hard and overcoming challenges, working on self-development, self-growth, and just achieving higher levels of my own personal inability, like my own personal abilities. I think that that's a big passion of my own. I think additionally that the next part of it was motivation. So this side of it, your motivation gets you ultimately to express and illustrate to yourself what is your why. So what makes you enjoy it a ton, or what makes you feel satisfied about what you're doing. And again, based off what I just talked about, a little bit about my passions, I think that that was a big part of it as well too, is you have to understand your motivation. So it's not just the money for me that motivates me, but it's the ability that what I can do with the money, how I can leverage it as a tool for being able to make more choices, to being financially free, to having, less stress in certain ways by knowing that I'm financially secure. So I think motivation is then the next one. And I think, speaking as well, back on the passions part, that's a big part of driving yourself too. Is I think I've mentioned in a previous podcast that understanding your passion is a massive part to determining your why and your purpose. And I think this was the money podcast. It's pretty obvious which one it was. If you look through the titles, I think it was the second podcast I ever did. But finding your passion, for me, I'm going to be making a switch soon, I think within the next 1 to 2 years maximum, where I start to reinvest a lot of the income that I've made into something that I'm going to be a lot more passionate about, something that I have a lot more passion for, and something that I see myself building for at least the next 5 years, not just 1 to 2 years, but something that I'm really truly going all in on. And so I think, again, if you pull together your passion, pull together your motivation, and if you pull together maybe even your values, I think that was one of the other ones. So for myself, the idea of giving back to people, that being part of my values and part of my beliefs that guide the actions that I'm taking and why I'm taking them. So leading back to motivation. So if you pull together your values, your motivations, and your passions, and you're able to write those down, I think that it will make it much clearer and easier to be able to understand what is your why and your purpose. Now, there's other things that you can leverage, like your strengths and your weaknesses, and, for example, like what I'm doing now, going through experiments, like trying to figure out what business you do and don't like, and things like that. I think that that's also part of it as well. So that's why I say that finding your why and your purpose is ever changing, because through self-experimentation and through learning more about yourself, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, you will understand more about your why and your purpose. But I think ultimately, if you focus on those first three that I talked about, the motivations, passions, and the values, you're going to be much clearer what right now is your driving why and purpose in doing what you're doing. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think that explains what my why and my purpose is on a decent level right now, but hopefully also provides a little bit of value on how to determine what your why and your purpose is based off of where you are right now in your life, because it's going to change. It's very likely going to change what your why and purpose is. I've seen it happen in myself, and I've definitely seen it happen in some of my closer friends that are of similar age that are driving just as much as they are in their lives, whether it's at business or not. So I hope this was valuable, and I thank you so much for listening this far into the episode. If you have, I hope you were able to take something away from it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast.